Well, it finally happened. Nintendo held an hour-long presentation of their new Nintendo Switch 2 console, showing off tons of different games, from complete cringe to absolute gold. They revealed more detailed specifications and, of course, the release date, June 5th of this year. So you don't have to rewatch the entire presentation, which, by the way, lacked during the most crucial moment when Cyberpunk was being shown for the Switch, and we only found out about it from the audio. I've gathered all the most interesting parts in this video, including the price and pre-order date, so don't skip ahead to avoid missing anything. Enjoy the viewing! Let's start with the console itself and smoothly transition to the games. Overall, it looks exactly the same as in the renders. Unfortunately, in some places, the screen has gotten bigger, a full 8 inches, but the bezels around the edges are still quite noticeable. However, the screen resolution will be full HD at 120 Hz, which through the dock station will output native 4K with HDR support. Speaking of the dock station, it received an additional cooler for cooling the console, which will draw air from the bottom and blow it out the top, thereby collecting all the surrounding dust. But that's fine. The main thing the company emphasized was the new button on the right Joy-Con for launching a separate voice chat. Yes, finally they're allowing us to communicate with friends and other players without using a smartphone app. Plus, you can not only chat, but also share your screen with friends. Even during the presentation, it was lagging and breaking into pixels, but considering it's a live stream of the image, that's not surprising. What's interesting is that the microphone is built into the console itself at the top and works with NVIDIA algorithms for noise cancellation, so background noise or game sounds won't interfere. But the camera, this is exactly the cringe I mentioned at the beginning. Basically, Nintendo reinvented the wheel, or more precisely, the webcam. It looks like a Pixar lamp, connects to the upper USB-C port, and apparently automatically centers the image on your face. Then using algorithms, it removes the background if you select that option. Though it's unclear why they didn't just build the camera into the console itself. Actually, no, it's clear why. Because then they couldn't sell it separately for $50. But in principle, that's for the better. Whoever needs it can buy it. What's nice is that chat will be available for free for a whole year after the console's release, and after that, only for Nintendo Switch Online subscribers. Far more questions arise about the starter game that explains how the new Joy-Cons work. Just like PlayStation had Astro's Playroom, which showed off the DualSense functionality and previous console generations, a cool game for getting to know PlayStation, Nintendo will have Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. It also looks quite interesting. But here's the catch. While Astro's Playroom was free, Nintendo's Welcome Tour is paid, as if you were expecting too much. Otherwise, everything is not bad. The design looks minimalist, the magnetic Joy-Cons shouldn't loosen over time. The sticks have become larger, so now you don't need attachments, although again, they didn't say a word about whether they've stopped drifting. The triggers are bigger, although the thickness of the Switch itself hasn't increased, and consequently no grip handles were included. If you need them, you'll have to buy special cases separately. The internal buttons have also become more comfortable, and most importantly, of course, is the mouse mode. I imagined this mode differently before the presentation, up to having a desktop like the Steam Deck. But in fact, it turned out this feature is only needed for games. Most likely these will be individual games where such controls will be used, because in that case, it ruins the whole vibe of a portable console when you need to sit at a table and fidget with these Joy-Cons. By the way, they also showed how to play shooters with them, but in my opinion it's not great. Although, what do you think if they bring CSGO to it? Write in the comments. Regarding hardware, they didn't tell us anything. What processor will it have? What technologies? From leaks, we know about the NVIDIA T239 on the Ampere architecture, which is also used in GeForce RTX series graphics cards. That gave hope for ray tracing, but the shown footage buried that hope, although some frames actually looked similar. They also didn't say anything about DLSS, although rumors suggest something similar to DLSS 3 with frame generation. But that's already speculation. Officially, Nintendo only revealed the storage, a whole 256 gigabytes versus 32 on the previous model, which is quite nice. But your old memory cards won't work with the new portable, unfortunately, and you'll need to buy new ones if you have a lot of games. And yeah, they showed a lot of games during the presentation, and some of them, no exaggeration, were legit shocking, like a brand new Demon's Souls style game, exclusive to the Switch 2. It's actually called the Duskbloods, but guess what? It's being developed by the same From Software team, with that same gothic vibe and classic Souls-like mechanics. The game is expected to launch in 2026, but even before that, there's going to be plenty to play. They've confirmed backward compatibility with the first Switch, and upgrades for certain games on the new Switch, including both Zelda titles, now running at 60 frames per second. Although, some of those upgrades, like for Zelda, will be paid DLC, while others, apparently free. How they're deciding that, I honestly have no idea. There was truly a lot of good stuff shown. Nintendo clearly tried to ensure they'd have plenty to play at launch. So I won't even talk about games from the previous generation. It all started with a new Mario Kart installment, or rather even a new game in this universe. It's so massive that they're holding a separate Nintendo Direct just for it on April 17th, though essentially it's what commenters accurately called Mario Horizon, a racing game with an open world, changing weather and time of day on a huge map with different biomes. And you can literally drive yourself to each new race, meeting other real players along the way. The graphics have noticeably improved. They're now less cartoonish, which makes it look a bit unusual, and the typical mechanics have been diversified with new possibilities, like parkour with wall riding and pearls, or dynamic tracks that can transform during the race from ground to water, air, and back. Where have I seen this before? I think in The Crew. So it turns out to be a symbiosis of different ideas with cartoon graphics. Interestingly, there will be both a bundle with the console at release and a separate game. Only the cartridges will cost $80 to $90. I hope the digital release will be cheaper. They showed Metroid Prime 4 Beyond in first person, which was used to demonstrate the Joy-Con mouse functionality. The game was announced back in 2017, but due to technical problems, development had to be restarted, and now it will be released on the new console, but without an exact release date yet. They also showed Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, a pure grinding fighter against hordes of monsters, which even lagged during the test footage. I'm not a big fan of such one-button games where you literally have to mash one button to defeat enemies. But I'm sure many will like it, both because of the Zelda aesthetics and the more detailed storytelling of the heroes of the Hyrule world. To be honest though, it looks like some kind of DLC, and if it's priced accordingly, then there won't be any problems. Release is scheduled for winter this year. And among the last exclusives that made my mouth water was Donkey Kong Bonanza, a new three-dimensional platformer with gorgeous graphics, high detail, and most importantly, completely destructible environments. Of course, even in the trailer there were visible frame drops, but with such elaborate development, it's not surprising. Release should be expected shortly after the console's launch in July this year, and these were just the company's exclusives, without the improvements to old games. There were far more announcements from third-party companies. For example, as I mentioned at the beginning, Cyberpunk with all DLCs. It actually doesn't look as bad as one might expect. It's not clear yet whether there will be 60 frames and stable Full HD, but the fact that such a game is coming to Switch gives hope for other major releases. For instance, GTA, at least online, not to mention the 6th installment. By the way, Cyberpunk will release on Switch 2 on June 5th. Plus that very The Duskbloods, a new project from From Software exclusively for Switch 2, which I'm sure will look no worse than Demon's Souls on PS4, where that game was released. According to leaks, Switch 2 and PlayStation 4 are similar in performance. That's why I'm really looking forward to this game, which online has already been dubbed the continuation of the demonic sauce. However, as I already mentioned, the game will be released in 2026. The wait can be eased with the no less colorful and hardcore Souls-like Elden Ring, which will also come with additional content exclusively for Nintendo Switch 2. They also showed Borderlands 4 and Hades 2, which I wasn't really surprised by, but what did surprise me was the new James Bond project from IO Interactive, Project 007. No release date was specified, nor any coherent gameplay. But the previous Bond games weren't bad, so that's also worth waiting for. They also showed Split Fiction, a new game from the creators of It Takes Two, which perfectly fits Nintendo's concept of family gaming, especially with the new game share feature for playing on multiple consoles with one copy of the game. Although in this particular case, it might not work, because as I understood, you can share games between consoles, but they will still run on only one device. That is, if you have two Switches or a friend with a portable, you can share your games with them, but the game will only run on one console until you transfer it to another. Hogwarts Legacy will get a graphics update. What exactly hasn't been announced yet? Maybe by the time you're watching this video, the details are known. But after the presentation, you can only see a smoother picture, around 60 frames, maybe even 120, considering they managed to port the game even to the base Switch, plus HDR support, new Joy-Con mouse support, and the like. And considering that even the mouse will work, you can expect stable frames as the mouse is more sensitive to jerks than sticks. So now you can replay Hogwarts with better graphics. Also, after the Switch release, on July 11th, the classic of the skating genre, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, will become available, along with a collection of the Balding Stealth Mercenary, Hitman World of Assassination. They also showed Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, which will release on the console's launch day and offer new content, namely new cutscenes and the Red Light Raid mode, which includes a new online multiplayer mode where up to 4 players can team up to fight waves of enemies. And what probably made me smile was the long-delayed Hollow Knight Silk Song, with a stated date of sometime this year. But honestly, it's already hard to believe, though it's about time. 7 years have passed since the announcement. And also, what Nintendo Switch Online subscribers will be happy about is the addition of games from previous consoles to the catalog, including GameCube for connoisseurs of classics, Game Boy, and many others. Personally, I was expecting some remakes, for example Ocarina of Time, after seeing the progress of an ordinary fan who's making his version on Unreal Engine 5. But expectations weren't met. Of course, these aren't all the announcements, just those that I remembered. If I missed something, write about it in the comments. By the way, they didn't stop at games. They also showed an interesting feature that applies to various cooperative games. If previously for playing with friends you needed to detach Joy-Cons or buy additional ones, now you'll have to buy an additional console. But seriously, the feature is really cool. Now it's enough for one person to buy the game, and you can play it with friends right away on multiple devices, obviously provided that it's a cooperative game and you're nearby. And not only the new Switch 2 will work for this, but also old models from the original to Lite with OLED, in my opinion, really cool. Among other interesting things, they showed a new Pro Controller which has changes only in the headphone jack, for which thank you, the C button, the one for voice chat. And 2 paddles appeared on the back, or rather buttons in their shape, since someone holds a patent on the actual paddles, which is why you rarely see regular versions. Overall, these are all the changes. But considering many people consider the Pro Controller the gold standard among gamepads, perfection doesn't need improvements. Plus, there will also be a version designed like the GameCube controller. How comfortable it is, I don't know, never had the chance to hold the original, but if they're releasing it, somebody must need it. That's how the presentation turned out. To be honest, they didn't show much. I personally was expecting more details about the technical capabilities of the console, but we'll probably find out after the release, as well as how long it will take enthusiasts to hack it. But they did show a lot of good games. Even though most of them are multi-platform, they're releasing right at launch with decent graphics for a portable. Plus, the Switch will have a couple of interesting exclusives, besides the default Zelda and Mario ones. I will at least buy Switch 2 for the Duskbloods. And how did you like this presentation? Write in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Thanks for your attention, and see you next time.